Hello, you amazing people. Welcome back to RXMemes. Today I have a special treat for you because it is a long compilation of r/malicious compliance. I know how you guys love those, and I do too. I love reading them. They're so funny most of the time. So I wanted to give you something like that because you've been so patient these last couple days when I've been feeling under the weather. But as usual, I will put a timestamp in the corner if you want to skip through this long intro and get straight to the stories. And if you decide not to skip, then you can't complain. So last video's question of the day was, if you ever win anything on like Tim Hortons Roll Up the Rim or McDonald's Monopoly or anything like that, and like a lot of you have won food prizes, drink prizes, stuff like that. Some of your friends have won like gift cards and stuff. One of you won an iPod Shuffle, which is the biggest prize I've ever seen someone win. So that's awesome. And update, Roll Up the Rim is now over where I live, and I still haven't won anything. This whole time, nothing. So whatever, I still drink coffee anyways, and the caffeine rush is a win enough for me. So today's question I picked while I was driving today because I saw a car that reminded me of a Pokemon, okay? So I'm going to insert a picture of the car I'm talking about. It's a Nissan Juke. And ever since that came out, all I could think of was how much it reminded me of a Scyther. I don't know why. Like, when I see it, I'm just like, oh yeah, Scyther, there it is. Like, I don't know. And that got me thinking about other objects that have kind of like a persona or that like remind you of a character or something. Sometimes I see it with houses too, like they look like a face. Do you guys see that, or am I just 100% crazy? So let me know in the comments if you ever see stuff like that or if I'm just crazy. But be nice, please. And with that being said, I really hope you enjoyed today's video. I did work really hard on it. I was thinking of doing 1-hour videos once a week because my channel is growing so fast, and I'm so grateful to each and every one of you who decides to stick around and subscribe. And we're at 2,700 subscribers now in the last like 5 days since the 1-hour special. I can hardly believe it. I'm so grateful. So I was thinking, because my channel seems to be growing quite fast and you do seem to like the longer videos, so I'd like to try to put an hour-long compilation out once every week or at least 2 weeks, because I'm so grateful to you guys. So sorry about the long intro again. I would appreciate it if you hit that like button and if you decide to subscribe. Otherwise, let's get right into the video. Extra cheese on your fries, you say? Here you are, madam, and may you eat in good health. Posted by user/timeshunger. Obligatory disclaimer that's so obligatory it has become cliche itself. LTL, FTP, and TLDR at the end. Also, trigger warning for anyone offended by crimes against potatoes, cheese, and cuisine in general. I have since attempted to atone for my sins by never treating food this poorly again. With that out of the way. Over a decade ago, I worked in a small independent pizzeria in the rural Midwest USA as both a cook and nominally an assistant manager, which seemed to imply that I had the authority to bear the brunt of customer complaints, while also lacking the authority to do much about them, other than call for an actual manager. Even so, it was a pretty nice job, in no small part due to the fact that being a non-chain restaurant in a small town in the Corn Belt, most of our clientele was fairly nice and civil. Or near insensate from being high on moonshine or some other recreational pharmaceutical after some local hoedown or shindig, or both, since I found the Venn diagram of chill folks and folks who are likely intoxicated by cannabis to contain a not insignificant overlap. Now for a little background. This episode I am to relate took place during those Halcyon days where the Atkins diet was at its zenith. For those sane people outside the US, or otherwise sheltered from it in a different manner, the Atkins diet was ostensibly a health plan to assist with weight loss by cutting out carbohydrates from one's diet. In reality, many, perhaps most of its practitioners labored under the pretense that despite incredible intakes of high-fat and high-calorie foods, the avoidance of bread would somehow cause Mother Nature and her sons heart disease and malnutrition to go blind and forget about them for a while. Another point to note is that, unlike some pizzerias, our pizza place served much more than just pizzas. Though pizza was the primary product on offer, we had a bunch of different sandwiches: steak, chicken, fish, etc., calzones, wings, various homemade breads, and french fries and other fried foods. With the onset of Atkins, our menu morphed to include such idiocies as breadless sandwiches, breadless pizza, etc., which are too depressing to describe in detail. At the time of this incident, I had been working there for about a year and a half. It was a Friday, specifically the Friday after Thanksgiving. For non-USers or those not in the know, Thanksgiving is our pagan ritual where we offer sacrifices of food to the gods, gluttony, and annoying relatives. Normally Fridays were rather busy, but because of the fact that every family had somewhere between a lot and infinite leftovers in their fridge from the day before, the restaurant was as dead as my sense of happiness after hearing Paul Reiser do stand-up one time. As such, I was the only one scheduled to work for the last 2 hours of the shift until closing. Much cleaning was done to fill the hours until midnight, when I could go home and play video games until sunrise like any self-respecting young person. Grease and dirt still sang mournful ballads of the terrible reckoning of that night. Anyway, having scrubbed the place to a shine, counted the till, and beat back the throng of customer, I found myself staring daggers at a seemingly time-locked punch clock with 15 minutes to go until midnight. I hate the jingle of bells on entrance doors to this day. In walked the couple, who I will call Mrs. and Mr. H for this story. Their actual last name began with H. They shared their surname with that of a portion of the name of a well-known brand of motorcycle, but I also had and have some other less than flattering nicknames utilizing the letter for them. Or at least for one of them. Mr. H was cool. He was this chill little scrawny guy who wore glasses roughly the thickness of a phone book folded twice and was incredibly soft-spoken and polite. His one damning quality was a peculiar reluctance to wear anything but a thin and very nipple-revealing sleep shirt and boxer combo into the restaurant, despite whatever weather condition may pertain outside. Mrs. H, on the other hand, was a beast of a specimen, in many senses of the word. She was quite, robust in her stature and physique, towering over me, a not short guy, by at least a foot, a third-ish meter for the fancy metric inclined, and easily outstripping me in weight by somewhere around 200 pounds. I'm too lazy to look up the pound-to-kilo conversion, sorry. Lest this seem like simple body shaming, I should note that her lack of social grace was every bit commensurate to her size. She was rude, brusque, demanding, and generally unpleasant in the way of all customers who come into a restaurant with the revealed epiphanic knowledge that they are right and by extension the rest of the world is wrong. 5 cheese fries, she said, spewing the words like a Victorian noble when telling a servant to clean up the dog's mess. Extra cheese. The door had barely had time to close behind her. Yes, ma'am, I said, wincing inwardly but hopeful of keeping the interaction brief so I could usher them on their way. And would you like— And make sure it's extra cheese this time. You duty heads never put on enough cheese. I should mention here that she did not say the word duty head, nor in fact any such mild swear replacement at any time. She had a habit that our manager called swear Tourette's, where her speech would be strangely punctuated by a wealth of rather inventive curse words, peppered throughout at about every third word emerging from her uncouth throat hole. The behavior was tolerated and she wasn't banned from the restaurant because, though uncivil and rude, it did not come across as designedly hostile or attacking. Since there was no non-hostile behavior she had to compare it against. It was her rest state, as it were. A background radiation and unpleasant aspect of her existence, the way tornadoes cause property destruction or Paul Reiser causes sadness. Also, everyone felt bad for her husband, who we knew would be deprived of our food as well if we banned her, and as I mentioned, he was a rather chill and cool, nipple shirt notwithstanding. Yes, ma'am, I said, and knowing the order had been only for her. And anything for you, Mr. H? No, thank you, he said. Though I may get a soda before we— And make sure not to put any of that toasted breadcrumb shit paste on it. Note, she actually said shit paste, and though I loathe repeating too much unwholesome language here, I feel this one is novel enough to warrant it. She interrupted. We're on Atkins. This confused me for several reasons. First, while I was perfectly capable of making up breadcrumbs to put on whatever the customer desired, we didn't have them as a normal part of our cheese fries recipe. Secondly, to the best of my knowledge, then and now, French fries are not carb-free, thus casting doubt on the soundness of using them as a weight loss tool. Ma'am, I said, searching my mental vaults for a way to say it in a way that didn't make it sound like she was stupid. You know potatoes and French fries do contain carbs, right? If you're doing Atkins, we have a lot of items that— Look, you— Just make the damn fries. I think I know more about healthy diets than you do. It is my misfortune to have missed such an obvious truth, I suppose, and as they say, the customer is always right. I obediently went to turn on the fryer, which I had turned off in my foolish assumption that no one would order 5 cheese fries less than 10 minutes before midnight the day after a major holiday, and put the fries on to cook. A substantial and overtime-inducing amount of time later, I loaded the french fries into a baking dish and proceeded to cover them with roughly double the amount of cheese as was normally served on them, and about 8 times the amount a human person should have in a whole week. When finished, I packaged them up and went to give them to Mrs. H. "Let me see 'em before we go to make sure you put on enough cheese," she said. I obligingly opened up one of the containers and then even more obligingly opened up the remaining 4 when she didn't trust that they would be equivalent to the already inspected one. "Not enough cheese," she said. "Go and do 'em again." At this point, I had reached that nirvanic state where annoyance crossed the threshold and became an almost beatific equanimity, bolstered by the malicious understanding that my obedience completely undermined her fruitless and stupid diet. I went and did 'em again, this time piling on roughly 3 times the cheese I had used previously, resulting in a soupy mess of liquid cholesterol that would have instantly made every cardiologist in the world die from depression. Another inspection followed. The results were declared satisfactory, and the H's left without further ado, leaving me free to close up shop for good. I didn't know it then, but over the next few weeks, the cheese fries order was to be placed several times per week by her, in the invincible ignorance of belief that it was Atkins approved. Several more weeks after that, after a time which the H's had failed to order anything from us, I was working alone again one night when, to my surprise, in came Mr. H, unencumbered by his wife. What's more, he came in to order just a baked fish platter, one of our healthiest menu items, and quite good, for himself. When I asked where his wife was, he informed me that she was no longer able to eat out for the foreseeable future because, as it turns out, french fries were not carb-friendly. Furthermore, she had actually gained somewhere on the order of 25 pounds during her diet, had had a minor cardiac episode, and was restricted by her doctor from eating anything more unhealthy than raw vegetables and air for a long while. When she finally did come back in, much later, and many pounds lighter, I was even astounded to find that she thanked me after listening fully intently to my alternative suggestions for healthier menu items. So we aren't doing our jobs right, are we? Very well, we'll follow your instructions to the letter. Posted by user/Hikaru Winter. Sorry, before anything else, for the formatting and the following rant. I tend to go on tangents, so please bear with this lurker. If this doesn't belong here, do tell please. For some context, this happened back in December 2013. Hit 18, wanted to get a job, earn enough cash to pay my way through college, that kind of thing. My very first job was as an azafata, an assistant, basically that can do any number of random things. In this case, I helped run a Coca-Cola stand in a game platform within a children's fair. It would last only for about a week, and the pay was decent enough for a brat trying to earn something for themselves, which was my case, even if the hours were pretty inconvenient. So there we were, 4 teens, 5 stands with about 30 interchangeable kids per stand at any given time. The others were old hand at this. All of them had worked there at least once, and one of them even more. We declared her team leader on the spot. And then, of course, there was our manager. Let's call her Lazy Bitch, or LB I suppose. Filing her nails and checking her phone while we all tried to organize ourselves, keep control of 2 stands at once, make sure the children were engaged and nothing of our assigned stand got lost or broken, try to pacify parents, convince kids that it was the next kid's turn, endure tantrums, keep track of children too young to be by themselves, being themselves, and then running to security to alert them, while inevitably the kids confessed they'd gotten lost, while praying nothing went to shit in the meantime. I, being the noob and pretty fast when inspired, was delegated to this role shortly and without fanfare. TL ran a tight ship. After the end of that first shift, which was a half day, LB was supposed to address any concerns we had. It was pretty stressful work, and TL told us it wasn't the first time someone just up and left mid-shift, and wasn't surprised they sent someone to keep an eye on things. LB up and left 2 hours before closing. We were baffled. She didn't look at us once, didn't even talk to us, nothing, zero, zilch, nada. And we had concerns. Oh, did we have concerns. We needed at least 2 people to control one of the games. 2 other games required us to run around behind plastic balls or crouching down to pick up bottle caps nearly every other second, lest a random unsupervised 3-year-old went and swallowed one. And believe me, there were legion. Besides which, we needed an additional half hour at the beginning and end of our shifts to set everything up and do cleanup. So at the end of the day, TL took out her phone and exasperatedly asked us to tell her our concerns and she'd relay them to the LB. Her tone wasn't promising though. Then things got weird. Why don't you email this to the people who employed us? What do you mean, HW? I'm sending this to LB, aren't I? But if LB wanted to listen to our concerns, she would have stayed, wouldn't she? If she won't, it's only right to relay them directly to her superiors. She wouldn't have had to report them anyway, right? And the employer wanted to know if there was any trouble. At this point, TL got a glint in her eye. I was pretty confused about this. In my mind, my solution was the reasonable next step. Damn, was I a naive, devious creature. Mind, I didn't realize the petty revenge brewing or the malicious compliance to follow. I really was that oblivious. Still am sometimes. TL nodded thoughtfully, recorded us all, and promised to make a report and send it to LB, her direct supervisor and our employer. LB was there the next day, bright and early and fuming. Ah, you received my mail then. What is the meaning of this? Our concerns. You were supposed to ask us yesterday and deal with them today, but we understand you must have had quite a busy schedule, so we compiled it ourselves. At this point, LB was turning a very intriguing shade of red. I remember wondering if she'd caught a cold or something. Sweet summer child. So sweet, so naive. From here on out, it's malicious compliance by all parts. There are no innocents beyond this point. I see. Then let's address them, shall we? We don't have the money to get more people, so you'll have to figure out something on your own. I'm sure you'll come up with something in regards to the stress. I said 1 person per game. Choose one and stick with it. Your responsibility is with the company. Lost children are not our concern. If parents get difficult, ask them to leave the premises. And on she went. Basically, she not only refused to address any of our concerns, dismissed them out of hand, and called us both incompetent and spoiled. She condescended us, told us we weren't doing our jobs right, and she hinted that we would get half pay. Look, I was a pretty sweet kid, a little naive, plenty kind, shy, quiet. No one had dared condescend me since I made my Christian education teacher cry when I was 7. I might have implied that Adam and Eve were incestuous, as was more than half the monarchy in Europe, and didn't understand where the church got the idea that it was a sin to f your sister when they happily put crowns on men who f their nieces. I like documentaries. So, we weren't doing our jobs right, were we? Okay. TL and I shared this look. So we closed down the most troublesome and popular game because we're short on staff, we're terribly sorry. Put a barricade at the door and limited entry to about 30 people at a time, parents included. Closed the second most troublesome and popular game booth, mine, incidentally, in the last 3 hours of our shift so we could take short breaks to de-stress. We called, loudly, at the security guards when a lost kid wandered our way. To their bewilderment, it's the company policy apparently. Can't leave the booth to help lost kids. We got a talking to this morning, you see? We smiled at ranting parents until they lost steam and started babbling awkwardly, looking a little creeped out. LB laid down the law, did she? Well, we were embracing the law and made it our. On that note, that day we made about half of what we did on the half shift. On half shift, we worked 4 hours. That day, we stayed from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. plus an additional hour for opening and closing, and most of what we earned were tips from the parents. TL kept note of it with all the precision and dedication I thought only surgeons and homicide detectives possessed. Apparently road engineers do too. So you can imagine LB's face when she came in the next day because she'd decided to be more proactive apparently. Her malicious compliance. One of our concerns was that she wasn't truly present to attend to any sudden or unexpected incidents that we didn't know how to deal with, like accidents for example, and looked at our earnings. She accused us of taking the money for ourselves. TL gave her the impeccable record that she amiably reminded the woman she had sent our employer and her superior already of our earnings the day before. Reminded the LB of our suggestions, was shot down. We were reamed again. She repeated the same spiel. We grimly followed the rules even more aggressively than before. TL kept a log, brought a sheet, and asked the parents to sign, if they'd please, because corporate is doing a survey, you see. And when they didn't, she asked their kids, which were always happy to have a bic in hand to get to some mischief. Not to worry, TL had at least 200 of them in her bag. I figured we'd passed the event horizon about then, but I didn't even care anymore. Instead of smiling at ranting parents until they ran away uncomfortable and disquieted, I was good at this one. We called security instead. Corporate policy, harassment of the employees will result in the guilty party being escorted from the premises, and got them escorted out of the fair entirely. The most popular game remained closed, the other games closed for about 2 hours each, irregularly, while we took our lunch and bathroom breaks. It was anarchy at this point, and TL was unstoppable. Every day when she got home from work, she sent our lists of complaints with an added bonus for each day that passed to our superiors, LB included, plus ourselves, just in case she got in contact with the union to make inquiries. Asked a lawyer friend to help her look at our contract, endured LB's rants each morning, and kept us informed and working as a well-oiled machine despite the chaos. It was awe-inspiring. I wanted to be her when I grew up. On the final day, things had calmed down considerably. LB didn't show up, which at this point was pretty suspicious in hindsight, but we didn't care. It had been a tiring week and the calm was relaxing. In the morning, we only had to deal with a tourist group, no more than 50 total. None of them spoke our language to save their lives, but I was pretty fluent, even if my pronunciation was pretty awful. So we got them more than once, and probably broke even from LB's shitty managing skills cash-wise thanks to them alone. TL noted it all down religiously, and I played tour guide with her blessing. Kept an eye on their kids when they ran around and translated for everyone. Then I saw LB walking to our booth. I'd already explained to a couple of the parents about LB and our circumstances, mostly to translate another azafata's gossip. So when they saw her, and I confirmed her as LB, they told me to go back, and they'd come say goodbye later. They were really lovely people. So I reached my booth shortly before LB, and then there was silence. Literally everyone in the game platform was looking at us like I guess people look at a train wreck. And then LB smiled and told us in tones of rejoicing and celebration that she was ready to address our concerns. That, well, I knew TL was angry. I knew A and L were angry. I myself was pretty confused because, hello, look around you. There's about 20 kids total today and not even in one of our booths at once, which was our actual most pressing concern. I may have said that aloud. LB looked stunned and indignant. TL looked delighted and stunned too. Everyone looked pretty stunned. Yes? Yes. And then, in the middle of that stalemate, the handful of pretty tourist mothers sashayed in, and there's no other word for it, bypassed the ticket box, kissed me on the cheek, and put a 50 in each of our tip jars, before sashaying right the out. What the ever-loving I felt dirty for sharing her WTF moment. I'm mature enough to admit it, probably. She got back her bearings pretty quick, though, and began ranting. I didn't pay quite as much attention as maybe I should have, but in my defense, the guy from the racing game booth beside ours was kind and sweet and had given us free merchandise on the sly when they got it. And he was curious about what was going on and who the crazy lady, LB, was. Then LB said that any earnings on our tip jars would go to the company since they had been earned in their property and we weren't their employees. And we should be grateful we wouldn't get half pay. And I got the hell back into the conversation because what the That's about when TL lost her shit. In that quiet way that makes people with vengeful siblings get the hell out of Dodge before shit hits the fan. I don't have siblings, but I have more than 20 cousins, and when I noticed that TL didn't immediately come up with a sassy rebuttal, I made my excuses, grabbed A and L, and got the heck out of there. TL told us later that she had memorized the company manual, out of sheer spite, her words, and told LB in perfect detail what would happen if she or the company touched our spoils. In very polite, very small words, just in case, she then asked us if we'd be willing to go to court over this because her lawyer friend told her we had a case if we wanted. TL told me I didn't have to if I didn't want to. This was my first job after all, and no one should make me feel pressured. If it made me, or anyone else, the slightest bit uncomfortable, she should carry on alone. A protested, of course, she was all for it. L was in the fence, though, but me? Well, it went like this more or less. If you need my help, I'll help. Are you sure, HW? Sure, I won't be coming back next year anyway, and I don't want anyone they hire to be treated like we were. That was my sticking point, believe it or not. I'd never worked before, but I've suffered secondhand the results of a toxic working environment, and I don't want that for anyone, even now. Long story short, we won. We got our sizable paycheck plus 10 times for that. Laboral harassment charges. I'm not sure if that's how you say it in English, sorry. But yeah, in the end, I earned in a week what I'd need to pay for a year of college tuition. Thanks for being a bitch, Mrs. Manager. When retail customers feel entitled to extra discounts for no reason, you give it to them. Posted by user/Amaranthi Nightmare. I worked at a pretty popular department store for years, and I have to say that the customers this store breeds are the worst of the worst. This store is probably 90% of the reason that so many customers feel as entitled as they do. The cashier had the hiccups and was incredibly annoying. Isn't there anything you can do for me? Was an actual honest-to-God complaint one lady had when I was a supervisor. So anyway, I was covering a break up at the registers. I was a supervisor at the time and had also already given my 2 weeks notice. I was beyond fed up. It was like spring of my senior year all over again. I had no more left. So I'm up at the registers and this lady who couldn't have been more than 40 comes up with a huge cart full. Anyone who has worked in retail, you know this woman. She's got the hair. She's smacking her gum at me while she talks on the phone. The entire transaction is delayed because I need her to pay and she starts to ignore me because apparently I'm the rude one for interrupting her phone call. She proceeds to tell the person on the other end, "Give me a second," and finally turns to me and says, as if I'm an impatient child testing her last bit of patience, "Yes? Here's your total, ma'am. Do you have any coupons or rewards to use today?" She nodded, and here's when she drops a few clippings on the counter in front of me, ignoring my outstretched hand, and turns her attention back to her phone. As soon as I look at the coupons, I see that none of them are usable. She has one that is $10 off your menswear purchase of $50 or more. She has all women's clothing. The next coupon expired 2 months ago. Another one doesn't start for another week, etc., etc. So I try again to get her attention. She's just as lovely and accommodating as the last time. She rolls her eyes, tells the person on the phone that she will have to call them back, and gives me another sharp, "Yes? Sorry, ma'am, this coupon is expired. This one hasn't started, and this one is only for when you purchase $50 worth of menswear. Do you have any other coupons or rewards?" She stares at me like I had just called her mother some unsavory name. Excuse me, what? What could I do but shrug helplessly? You have got to be kidding me. That is the entire reason I came out here today? To use those coupons? I really can't use them? Unbelievable. Some customer service here. All the while, she's packing her useless coupons back into her purse and glaring scorch marks into my soul. Remember I said I was done? My patience before Shopzilla here was already at 0. She tipped the scales. I was officially in the negatives. I had negative and negative patience left. So when she said, "You should be ashamed of yourself being so rude to a customer," something in me snapped. I smiled sweetly at her, mustered up a bright and cheery expression that I usually reserve as my waitress face, and said, "I'm so sorry you feel that way, ma'am, but on the bright side, since it's Tuesday, I can still apply your senior's discount. So at least you aren't losing that one, right?" I can't quite describe her expression. I think she was angry, but I think she was more shocked, and in that state of shock, she sputtered out, "I'm not a senior." I mimicked her shock, trying to appear horrified by my accidental faux pas, and then immediately said, "Let me take that off there for you then," and promptly took the senior discount off, bumping her total up another $20. "I'm so sorry for the misunderstanding, ma'am." Oh boy, she was pissed, but like I said, I think she was more shocked. She seemed a little dumbfounded. She paid, she took her stuff, she left. I will take that petty moment of satisfaction at her horrified expression to my grave. It was even worth the write-up that I did end up getting after she called the store and gave my manager a piece of her mind. I just want help. You want me to follow your request? You got it. Posted by user/Nelloran. Buckle in. This is going to be with a bit of a backstory, but all the details are important to the outcome of the MC. When I was 15, I uncovered repressed memories of early childhood trauma. I was familiar with our little rural community women's counseling center because the ladies would come in during health class to talk about self-defense and how to protect yourself from being assaulted. Sounds deep, but these ladies were cool. I knew to go to my guidance counselor, GC, for a referral to see the women's counselor, WC, who came into our school if I wanted to meet with her for a one-on-one counseling. This was also told to us during that health class, how it was free and confidential, so I put in a request to meet with the GC. GC was clearly uncomfortable with my request, but tried to be helpful. She didn't really know what to say, but promised that when WC came in, she would tell her I wanted to see her. I was also the concert mistress of our high school orchestra and a National Honor Roll student. I went to many academic and musical competitions year after year. Music and studying, I came to learn, were huge outlets for me. WC was lovely. She was young, spunky, and empathetic. I saw her for a year, and during that year, I was very grateful to GC and her referral to WC, despite GC's awkwardness. So I would often volunteer in the GC office to give back. GC and I developed a friendly relationship. Until one day, I told my parents about the repressed memories and WC. WC had been working with me to encourage being honest with my parents. It took a long time, but I got up the courage to tell them. Unfortunately, things did not go well. It's another story that sort of detracts from the malicious compliance, so I'll just leave it with they didn't believe me about the trauma, and they were really mad that the school allowed me to see some young, inexperienced counselor who was putting ideas in my head without parental permission. They marched down to the school, met with GC and the principal. They had many meetings. Over time, I had restrictions placed on my meetings with WC. At first, I was strongly discouraged from seeing her. Then, when I refused, the school banned me from seeing her. During this time, GC's relationship with me changed. She started saying I needed to stop making up stories. She wouldn't talk to me anymore unless I stopped lying to her. Of course, this confused and hurt me, so I stopped volunteering at the GC office. Whenever I saw WC at school to meet with other students, I would slip her notes in the hallway to tell her how I was doing. GC was furious when she saw me slipping a note to WC one day. She told the principal and they called my parents. They all had another meeting and decided something was wrong with me to be acting so non-compliant with their rules. They wanted me evaluated for a behavioral class in the neighboring school district. Our school didn't have such a class, so all the kids in the county would go to the other school district for the services. I tried to talk to GC. I was a smart kid and I knew this class would not offer me the same academic instruction. I was enrolled in college-level honors classes. The behavioral support class was for kids on juvenile probation or so disrespectful that they couldn't be appropriate in class. I loved class and my biggest problem was not speaking up enough. GC told me it was not up for discussion. I had done this to myself if I had just done what I was told, and she couldn't understand why I was acting so unlike me and fighting them on not seeing WC. I wouldn't be in this situation. She said we would all have a meeting, me included, at the other school to discuss my problems and get enrolled. I felt totally alone and isolated. I didn't want to leave my school, classmates, teachers, and definitely not my orchestra. This other school didn't have an orchestra at all, so it wasn't like I could transfer to a new one. Then it hit me. I wasn't doing anything wrong. These few adults in my life were in total denial, but there were other adults out there, like WC, who would believe me. I resolved that when I went to the meeting, I would be honest to the new school administrators. If GC wanted me to comply, I was going full throttle. On a Saturday morning, my dad and I arrived at the neighboring school. Now, my dad was a kind soul, but he was clueless as to what was going on because he only knew what the school was telling him about me. And he was in super denial about the trauma, so he was no help there. During the whole meeting, he just sat there in silence and watched. Also in attendance besides us was GC, new school vice principal, new VP, and new school guidance counselor, new GC. GC spoke at a length about my academic history, orchestra, volunteering, WC, and the behavioral problems of failing to follow through with their directions. New VP and new GC were professional, polite, listened attentively, and took notes. Then they turned to me. GC says you're in honors classes, Lauren. What's your favorite class? Honors English, but I also really like Psychology 101. I say honestly. They look at my records my GC brought, and they are my highest marks. Wow, new GC commends. And I see here you won a regional writing competition last year? I grinned. Yes, it was the first time I actually won money. I framed my first dollar because I was so proud. I still have this dollar today. Then VP chimed in. And you were in your school's orchestra. What do you play? I play the violin. I'm the concert mistress. I smile. And I go to district and regional competitions every year. It's a lot of fun. Sometimes we get together on the weekends, some of the players and I, and we practice just for fun. New VP and new GC exchange looks. They whisper amongst themselves and they look a little worried and concerned. GC, new VP starts. You are asking us to consider Lauren for the behavioral support class. This class, new GC and I, don't think it's the right fit. There are a lot of kids in there who have done serious things like attack other students with weapons or engage in other criminal activity. To put Lauren in there could actually harm her. She would start to associate with others who might negatively influence her. My heart jumped into my throat. They were believing me. I was so elated. I turned and looked at GC. Her face was serious and frowning. All of that being said, we would gladly still accept you. New VP kindly turned to me. In our honors classes. I'm sorry we don't have an orchestra here, but maybe you would like to start one? He smiled. Okay. I nodded and smiled. And one last thing, new GC piped up. She also turned to me and softly said, You were meeting with WC, right? Yes. My heart broke a bit hearing her name. Yes was all I could squeak out. We know WC very well. She comes here on Wednesdays to meet students. Would you like to see her again? Yes, I said excitedly. Yes, I'd love to. I turned to my dad, but he was quiet and didn't seem to have a reaction. Then I looked at GC. Her face was red. She was beyond angry. She angrily pushed back her seat and walked out of the meeting. New VP and new GC didn't chase after her. They had looks on their faces like they were glad she was gone. In the end, they said they would call GC on Monday if they still wanted to initiate the transfer with those conditions. I don't know what the conversation was like between them on the phone, but I never transferred. Sadly, GC never looked or spoke to me ever again. I started seeing WC at her office after school where the school had no control of me. I eventually graduated from the high school, still with national honors, leading the orchestra and getting counseling. There is a happy ending to this. GC quit the job and moved away. WC still works for the same agency and never gives up on her students. Her empathy and passion for justice motivated me to go to college. I became a social worker, and every day I help people. I always treat them without judgment and believe them. Alright everybody, that's it for today's video. I really hope that you liked it. Some of those stories were really saucy. I went and looked for stories that I had not heard before. I know that a lot of these are old, but I really did do some digging for them. So if you've heard them before, I apologize, but they were really juicy. So it's like a good story to hear. Anyways, if you liked this video, please thumbs it up and subscribe if you haven't already. I would really appreciate it. It helps me out. I'm going to try to put out another hour-long video next week. And don't forget to answer the question of the day, which was, do any objects or cars or anything like that remind you of people or characters or animals or something like that? So anyways, with that being said, I will see you in my next video. Bye!